The scent of brewing coffee and the low murmur of the morning news from the kitchen television had been the soundtrack to Carol Graham's life for 40 years. In their modest but comfortable Northwood, Michigan home, routine was a warm blanket, a testament to a life built on shared moments and quiet understanding. Paul, her Paul, would already be on his second cup, the newspaper spread before him like a sacred text, his brow furrowed over the sports section. They were a month past their 40th anniversary, a milestone celebrated with a quiet dinner at their favorite Italian place. They'd talked more about the future than the past, their voices full of the easy excitement of a long-awaited vacation. Their plans were simple, etched in the ledger of their dreams. One more year of Paul at the automotive plant. Then they'd sell the house, buy a small condo somewhere warmer, and finally live a life unburdened by alarm clocks and Michigan winters. They'd even started a Santa Fe fund, a running joke that became a serious goal, a symbol of adobe walls and turquoise skies. Their children, Lauren and Chris, were grown and gone, building successful lives of their own, a source of deep pride. This next chapter was supposed to be just for them. That Tuesday began with the sweet dew of late spring. Paul had left for work with his usual kiss on her cheek, his aftershave lingering in the air. Carol was in her sanctuary, the garden, her hands buried in the cool, dark earth that she had nurtured for decades. She was tending to her prize-winning hydrangeas, their giant blue heads lolling in the gentle breeze. It was then she felt it, a slight, effervescent tingling in her left arm, like a limb that had fallen asleep. She dismissed it as a pinched nerve from leaning over too long. She stood up, intending to go inside for some water, and a wave of dizziness washed over her so intensely the world tilted on its axis. The vibrant blue of the flowers smeared into the green of the lawn, a sickening watercolor bleed. She reached for the familiar comfort of the white picket fence to steady herself, but her hand wouldn't obey. Her fingers, which had just been so capable of teasing life from the soil, were suddenly clumsy, foreign things, refusing the command from her brain. A cold thread of panic tightened in her chest. She opened her mouth to call for her neighbor, Margaret, but the sound that emerged was a thick, garbled groan, a noise so alien and guttural she didn't recognize it as her own. The world, her neatly tended garden, the blue sky, it all folded into a suffocating darkness before she hit the ground. She awoke to the sterile, rhythmic beep of machines and the sharp, antiseptic smell of a hospital. A fuzzy white acoustic tile ceiling floated above her, a landscape of institutional despair. Paul was there, his face a crumpled mess of fear and worry, his skin unnaturally pale against his work shirt. Lauren and Chris were on either side of him, their expressions mirroring their father's terror. Carol's mind was clear, a calm island in a sea of confusion. She tried to speak, to ask what had happened, to reassure them with the calm authority she had always possessed. The words formed perfectly in her head, a clear, crystalline sentence. "I'm so glad you're here. What happened?" But what came out was a slurred, nonsensical mumble. "Glasu here? What happened?" Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the fog of her consciousness. She tried again, concentrating with all her might, forcing the air from her lungs. "What's wrong with me?" It came out as a frustrated, desperate moan. She saw the pity cloud her family's eyes, the way Paul's face fell, his hope extinguishing like a snuffed candle. He squeezed her good right hand, his own trembling. "It's okay, honey. Don't try to talk. The doctor said not to strain. You had a stroke. A bad one." The words hit her harder than the fall in the garden. A stroke. The word itself sounded like a final slamming door on the life she knew. The doctor came in later, his face kind, but his words clinical, using terms like severe aphasia and significant left-side paralysis. He explained that while her cognitive function, her thoughts, her memories, her awareness, was blessedly intact, the part of her brain that controlled the complex mechanics of speech and the movement of the left side of her body was a battlefield. The prognosis was a landscape of uncertainty. The life she knew, the future she had planned just that morning, with its promise of Santa Fe sunsets, had been wiped away. She was trapped inside her own mind, a silent spectator to her own unfolding tragedy. In the harrowing days that followed, Paul Graham transformed. He shed the skin of the ordinary husband and donned the shimmering armor of a martyr. He became the man every woman in Northwood whispered about with teary-eyed reverence, the impossible standard against which all other husbands were now measured. He orchestrated Carol's transition from hospital to home with the precision of a military general planning an invasion. Before she was even discharged, he had sold his beloved 19-foot fishing boat, the one he and his buddies took to Lake Huron every summer, and used the money to hire a team of contractors. They descended on the house, their hammers and saws echoing the destruction that had taken place inside Carol's brain. They installed a long, gently sloping ramp over the front steps, its raw pine a scar on the familiar facade. They widened the doorway to the master bedroom and refitted their shared bathroom with gleaming cold steel grab bars. He moved their queen-sized bed, the bed they had shared for 40 years, out of the room and into the guest room. In its place, he installed a sterile, adjustable hospital bed with cold metal rails. "It's just until you're back on your feet, honey," he had said, his voice a perfect balm of gentle reassurance. But Carol, watching from her new, cumbersome wheelchair, knew her feet might never feel the familiar give of their bedroom carpet again. Her home was no longer a sanctuary, it was a sick room. His devotion was a constant public spectacle of selfless love. He quit his job at the plant without a moment's hesitation, cashing in his pension 2 years early to become her full-time caregiver. "There was no other choice," he told a tearful Lauren over the phone, his voice strategically loud enough for Carol to hear from her perch in the living room. "She took care of me and the kids for 40 years. It's my turn now. It's an honor." Their children were in awe, their grief mingling with profound admiration. "Dad is a living saint," Chris said during a weekend visit, his eyes wide as he watched his father patiently spoon-feed Carol her pureed dinner, wiping a dribble from her chin with a tenderness that made Carol's heart ache with a confusing mix of love and shame. Neighbors, like Mrs. Gable from across the street, brought over casseroles and pies. Paul would greet them at the door, his face a perfect mask of weary gratitude, his shoulders slightly slumped. He'd update them on Carol's condition in hushed, solemn tones, always ending with, "But she's a fighter. We're fighters. We'll get through this together." Mrs. Gable would leave, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, telling her husband later that evening that she'd never seen such devotion in all her life. Carol existed in a state of suspended animation, a passive recipient of this overwhelming, suffocating care. Paul quickly learned her new silent language. He came to understand that a low, continuous hum meant she was in pain. A sharp, frustrated exhalation meant she couldn't reach something, and a soft sigh meant she was content. He bathed her with practiced efficiency, dressed her inert limbs, and turned her in the night to prevent the bed sores he'd read about with grim determination online. He managed her complex cocktail of medications with a meticulousness that was both reassuring and terrifying. He read to her in the evenings from mystery novels they both loved, his voice a steady drone as she drifted in and out of a medicated haze. The gratitude she felt was a physical weight in her chest, so heavy it was sometimes hard to breathe. He had sacrificed everything for her, his job, his retirement, his freedom. He was tethered to her broken body, and the guilt gnawed at her like a persistent rodent. She would grip his hand with her good one, trying to pour all of her love and thanks through her fingertips, her eyes welling with tears. He would pat her hand and smile, a sad, noble smile that seemed to capture all the sorrow in the world. "I know, Carol," he would say, his voice soft. "I know what you're trying to say. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." And in the echoing silence of her mind, she would thank God for sending her a hero, for giving her a man whose love was strong enough to withstand even this. About a month after Carol came home, as the initial flood of casseroles trickled to a stop, Paul sat by her wheelchair, his laptop balanced on his knees. His expression was one of thoughtful, pained concern, an expression she was coming to know well. "Honey," he began, his voice pitched to a register of gentle gravity. "I've been going over the finances. The insurance is good, a real blessing, but it just doesn't cover everything. The ramp, the bathroom modifications, some of this specialized equipment, and if we want to get you into that top-tier outpatient physical therapy in Ann Arbor, It's going to be a real stretch." He sighed dramatically, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of paternal worry. "I was talking to Chris, and he suggested we start a GoFundMe. I told him no at first. I hate asking for help, you know that. But then I realized, this isn't for me, it's for you. To give you the best possible chance." Carol could only nod, a fresh, hot wave of guilt washing over her. She was not just a physical burden. She was a financial black hole, swallowing their dreams of Santa Fe and replacing them with a mountain of medical debt. She gave a small, affirmative sound, her assent to this final humiliation. The campaign, titled "A Lifetime of Love for Carol," went live that evening. Paul's first post was a carefully constructed masterpiece of curated heartbreak. He chose a photo of them from their anniversary dinner, taken just weeks before the stroke. They were clinking wine glasses, their faces beaming with 40 years of shared history and future hope. The contrast with their current reality was devastatingly effective. Beneath it, he wrote a small novel of devotion. "40 years ago, I married the love of my life, my soulmate, Carol. We built a life, a family, and we're looking forward to a golden retirement together. Today, our journey has taken an unexpected and tragic turn. My beautiful Carol was struck down by a severe stroke, and our world has been changed forever. She is a fighter, the strongest woman I know, but the road ahead is long, and the costs are staggering. With a heavy heart, I have left my job to care for her full time, a sacred privilege I would not trade for anything in this world. We are private people, but we are humbly asking our community, our friends, and our family for a little help to give my Carol the best care that money can buy. Every single dollar will go towards her medical bills and intensive therapy. Thank you for your love, your prayers, and your support." It was like opening a floodgate in a dam of public sympathy. Donations poured in, first from friends and family in Northwood, then from Paul's former co-workers at the plant, and soon from strangers who had seen the post shared on Facebook. Paul became a dedicated and brilliant chronicler of their journey. He posted photos of him holding her limp left hand, the lighting soft and poignant, his face a study in sorrowful determination. He uploaded short video clips of him helping her with her grueling physical therapy exercises, his voice a constant stream of encouragement. "That's it, sweetheart, you can do it. Just one more. You're so strong." The comments section was a waterfall of praise and pity. "Paul, you are an inspiration to all husbands. This is what in sickness and in health truly looks like. Restoring my faith in humanity, donating now. God bless you both." The total climbed with dizzying speed, $10,000, $20,000, $50,000, then past $100,000. Paul would read the comments to Carol each evening, his voice thick with what she perceived as genuine emotion. "You see, honey? You see how much people care? They see our love, and they want to help." Carol would listen, a single tear rolling down her cheek, a tear of gratitude for the astonishing kindness of strangers, and of overwhelming, heartbreaking love for the incredible man who was her husband. He had not only sacrificed his life for her, but he had also swallowed his pride to beg on her behalf. The digital world had only confirmed what she already knew. Paul Graham was a saint. The days bled into one another, each marked by the same quiet, suffocating, and meticulously managed routine. Wake up to Paul's gentle voice. Be cleaned with antiseptic wipes. Be dressed in loose-fitting clothes. Be fed a mush of eggs or oatmeal. Be moved from the bed to the wheelchair via the hydraulic lift he'd installed. The television droned on with cheerful morning shows whose hosts chattered about lives she could no longer imagine. Then exercises. Then lunch. Then more television. Soap operas full of drama that paled in comparison to the silent opera of her own mind. The world, once vast and full of errands, lunches with friends, and spontaneous trips, had shrunk to the four walls of their living room. The large picture window overlooking the garden became her portal to the life she once had. She watched the seasons turn with a painful clarity. The hydrangeas she had planted bloomed in a riot of impossible color. Then their petals turned brown and papery, withering as autumn laid its chilly hand on Northwood. She was a ghost in her own home, a silent observer of a life that moved on without her, its vibrant colors fading to gray. Her mind, however, was a relentless, overclocked engine. Freed from the daily distraction of conversation and activity, it churned with memories and regrets, playing them on an endless loop. She remembered their first dance at a high school sock hop, the awkward, sweaty-palmed way Paul had held her. She remembered the birth of Lauren, the look of pure, unadulterated terror and wonder on his face as he held their daughter for the first time. She remembered the bitter arguments over money when the kids were young, the silent treatments after a fight about his mother, all the petty squabbles that had seemed so monumentally important at the time and so laughably, painfully insignificant now. And so all of it was filtered through the distorted lens of her present reality, her profound and bottomless indebtedness to him. Every gentle touch as he repositioned her pillow, every patient sigh as he cleaned up a spill, every spoonful of lukewarm soup he brought to her lips added another stone to the mountain of guilt that was physically crushing her chest. He was so tired. She was an expert on his face, and she could see it in the subtle slump of his shoulders when he thought she wasn't looking, in the dark, bruised-looking circles that had taken up permanent residence under his eyes. This was her fault. Her body had failed, a traitorous vessel, and in doing so had shackled him to this life of thankless, relentless servitude. The frustration was a physical thing, a solid scream trapped in her throat that had nowhere to go. She wanted to tell him to go out, to call his friend Dave and see a movie, to go fishing for a day and breathe air that didn't smell of disinfectant. She wanted to tell him it was okay, that she would be fine for a few hours alone. But all she could do was watch him with her pleading, expressive eyes. He would always misinterpret her look, seeing dependence where there was a desperate wish for his freedom. "Don't you worry, Carol," he'd say, patting her good hand with his warm one. "I'm not going anywhere. We're in this together, remember?" His devotion was absolute, a fortress with no escape, and it was a torment. He was her savior and her jailer, his love the heavy, unpickable lock on her cage. She would cry silently in the blackness of the night, the tears hot and useless on her cheeks, praying for a miracle, not for her own healing, but for him. She prayed for him to be free of the burden she had become. Sleep was a fickle visitor, a shy guest who rarely stayed long. Tonight it refused to come at all. Carol lay in the hospital bed, its mattress groaning with every slight shift of her weight, listening to the familiar night sounds of the house. The low electrical hum of the refrigerator cycling on in the kitchen, the groan of the floorboards in the hallway as the old house settled, the distant rumble of a truck on the main road. It must have been after 2 a.m. Paul, who usually slept the profound sleep of the utterly exhausted in their old bed down the hall, was up. She could hear the distinct creak of the third plank in the living room floor, followed by the low, conspiratorial murmur of his voice. "He must be on the phone with Chris," she thought with a pang of affection. Their son was a night owl, a computer programmer who often worked late, and he frequently called after midnight to check in on his father to offer support. The thought of her family, bound together by this crisis, was a small comfort in the vast darkness. Driven by a strange, lonely impulse, a primal desire to feel closer to the sound of her family's life, she reached for the controls and lowered the cold side rail of the bed. It descended with a soft, hydraulic hiss. Using her good right arm, she pushed and pulled, painstakingly maneuvering her inert left side until she was sitting on the edge of the mattress. From there, she transferred herself into the wheelchair she kept beside the bed, a clumsy, practiced maneuver that still left her breathless. The rubber wheels were blessedly silent on the polished hardwood, as she slowly propelled herself out of the oppressive dark of the bedroom and into the deeper shadows of the hallway. The living room was lit only by the faint, pulsing blue glow of the internet modem on the bookshelf. Paul stood with his back to her, silhouetted against the large picture window, the phone pressed tightly to his ear. The tone of his voice was immediately wrong. It wasn't the weary, patient tone he used with their children. It was sharp, energized, and slick with a gloating excitement. "Unbelievable, Shane. It just keeps coming in." Excitement. "We cracked 170,000 this afternoon," Paul chuckled, a sound utterly devoid of warmth or humor. It was the sound of a predator. Shane, not Chris. Carol's hand tightened on the wheel of her chair until her knuckles were white. She didn't know anyone named Shane. The posts are killing it. Absolute gold. The one I put up yesterday about trying to brush her hair and remembering our wedding day? Pulled in another $5,000 right there. A cold dread, slick and oily, began to seep into Carol's bones, a paralysis far more profound than the one that afflicted her body. She just sits there, looking at me with those big, sad, grateful eyes. She has no idea. Thinks I'm a goddamn saint. His voice dripped with a contempt so profound, so dismissive, it made Carol's breath catch in her throat. Yeah, the paperwork is all filed. The state facility in Grand Rapids is all set up for the 1st of next month. Once she's in their system, registered and forgotten, we're golden. He paused, listening to the voice on the other end. You bet. You book the flights. First class, we can afford it. And then, Santa Fe, my friend. Sun, golf, and no more changing bedpans. God, we earned this. He laughed again, a triumphant, ugly sound that echoed in the silent house, shattering 40 years of love, 40 years of trust, 40 years of her entire life. The truth didn't dawn on Carol. It struck her like a physical blow, knocking the air from her lungs and vaporizing the very foundation of her world. The next morning, the sun streamed through the living room window with a cheerfulness that felt like a personal, vicious insult. Carol had not slept. After Paul had ended his call, she had wheeled herself back to her bed with the stealth of a spy and lain there in the vibrating darkness, the monstrous replay of his conversation echoing in her mind. Every kind word he had ever said to her since the stroke, every gentle touch, every proclaimed sacrifice, was now tainted, twisted into a grotesque, calculated performance. He didn't love her. He loathed her. She wasn't his beloved wife. She was his winning lottery ticket, his golden goose, and soon a piece of inconvenient luggage to be checked into a state-funded warehouse. He came in at 7:30, right on schedule, carrying a tray with her breakfast. His footsteps were jaunty. "Morning, sweetheart," he chirped, his face arranged in its usual mask of gentle, weary concern. "How did my girl sleep?" The sheer, breathtaking hypocrisy of it was so staggering, so audacious, that for a moment Carol thought she might choke. He leaned in to kiss her forehead, a daily ritual, and she had to use every ounce of her will not to flinch, not to recoil from his touch. His lips felt like ice on her skin, a brand of betrayal. She was trapped. Her mind was a screaming, raging, plotting tempest, but her body was a useless vessel, her voice a broken instrument. She had to play along. Her very survival, her only chance at escape depended on it. The day was an exercise in the most exquisite and intimate torture imaginable. He spoon-fed her the bland, lukewarm oatmeal, chattering about a news story he'd seen about rising gas prices. She watched his mouth move, the gentle words spilling out, and saw only the venomous sneer from the night before. He helped her with her physical therapy, his hands on her, guiding her weak limbs through their prescribed motions. His touch was no longer comforting. It was the chilling, proprietary grip of her captor. "That's it, Carol. You're doing so great," he cooed, his voice a perfect imitation of pride. "Look at that movement in your arm." She wanted to spit in his face. She wanted to use her one good hand to claw at his eyes. Instead, she let her head loll in feigned exhaustion, giving him the performance he expected from his pitiable invalid. Feigned exhaustion. He was a brilliant actor, but now she was forced to become one too, and her life was the prize. Her prison wasn't just the wheelchair or the silent house. It was the role she had to play. The grateful, helpless wife. Later that afternoon, the phone rang. It was Chris. Carol watched as Paul spoke to their son, his voice a symphony of loving falsehoods. "Yeah, she's hanging in there, son. It's tough, but her spirit is strong. Oh, the GoFundMe? It's been a godsend. People are so good. It means we can give your mother the best." He listened, then laughed. No, don't you worry about me. Taking care of your mom is the only thing that matters." He hung up and smiled at Carol. That was Chris. He sends his love. And Carol sat there, screaming on the inside, a prisoner forced to watch her warden lie to her own child. Time was no longer a series of sunrises and sunsets. It was a weapon pointed at her head. "Next month," Paul had said. The 1st of the month. The words were a ticking clock in her head, each second bringing her closer to being warehoused in Grand Rapids, while he flew off to their dream life with a man named Shane. Panic was a useless, paralyzing emotion. She needed a plan. She needed a weapon. Her eyes, frantic and sharp, scanned the room, searching for anything, a tool, an edge, an opportunity. They landed on the tablet computer resting on her bedside table, its dark screen reflecting her pale, tense face. Paul had bought it for her a few weeks ago. "So you can watch your shows, honey, or listen to music. Keep your mind busy," he'd said with a benevolent, patronizing smile. He had set it all up for her, downloading streaming apps and simple puzzle games. He had also, she now realized with a jolt of pure electric adrenaline, set up her email account and logged her in. He saw the tablet as a pacifier, a toy for the invalid. He had fatally, arrogantly underestimated her. That afternoon, a window of opportunity opened. Paul announced he was going to the hardware store and then to the bank to deposit some checks from the neighbors. He would be gone for at least an hour. The moment the front door closed, she began her mission. She nudged the tablet closer with her right elbow, her only functional limb. Propping it against a stack of pillows, she swiped the screen on. The light felt like a beacon of hope. Her fingers were clumsy, her fine motor skills compromised, and her hand trembled with a mixture of residual paralysis and raw terror. She found the thick, rubber-tipped stylus he'd bought her, supposedly to make playing games easier. Gripping it was a monumental challenge, her fingers fumbling, but she finally managed a clumsy hold. Tapping the screen, she opened the mail application. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard she felt it in her throat. Every creak of the house, every car that passed on the street, sent a fresh spike of fear through her. To Lauren Graham. Her daughter was practical, level-headed. She would understand. The letters on the virtual keyboard seemed to swim before her eyes. She aimed for the L, missed, hit K instead, backspace. Her finger stabbed at the tiny X, try again. It was agonizingly slow, painstaking work. Her good hand, exhausted from the unaccustomed, focused effort, began to cramp. She persisted, sweat beading on her forehead and trickling down her temples. The message had to be clear enough to raise alarm, but simple enough for her to type before he returned. One painstaking letter at a time, a message began to form on the screen. A garbled but desperate plea from the depths of her silent prison. After what felt like an eternity, it was done. It was a mess of typos, extra spaces, and missing words, but the core of the horror was there. She took a deep, shuddering breath, her entire body trembling. She aimed the stylus at the small paper airplane icon that represented her only chance. With a final, decisive tap, she sent her prayer into the void. The screen confirmed it was sent. The message read, "Lorne, Dad Fawn, Moni Santa Fe, not sick. Help Mom." She quickly closed the app and pushed the tablet back to its original position, just as she heard his car pull into the driveway. 2 days later, Lauren's familiar blue sedan pulled into the driveway. Her arrival was unannounced, a breach of the new protocol where all visits were scheduled around Carol's care. She came to the door with 2 large bags of groceries, a plausible and thoughtful excuse. "Hi, Dad. I was at the big supermarket on the other side of town and thought I'd stop by and save you a trip. They had that coffee Mom likes on sale." Paul was visibly surprised but recovered with practiced speed, wrapping his daughter in a hug that was just a little too tight. "Lauren, what a great surprise. Come in, come in. Your mother will be so happy to see you." Lauren's smile was tight, a brittle thing that didn't reach her eyes. The email had landed in her inbox like a grenade. It was disjointed, almost nonsensical, but the raw, primal panic in those few misspelled words was her mother's voice, screaming to be heard after months of silence. As Paul bustled into the kitchen to put the groceries away, Lauren went straight to Carol's side, kneeling by her wheelchair so they were eye to eye. "Hi, Mom," she whispered, her voice urgent, her eyes searching her mother's. In that moment, with her champion before her, Carol let her mask of placid helplessness fall away completely. She locked eyes with her daughter and let all the terror, the rage, and the desperate, pleading frustration show. She shook her head frantically, a low, guttural moan escaping her lips, a sound of pure anguish. Lauren's blood ran cold. This was real. This was happening. "Dad's on the phone with Uncle Robert, bragging about how well you're doing," Lauren said, keeping her voice low and steady. "Mom, what is it? What did you mean about Santa Fe?" Carol's eyes darted wildly around the room, finally landing on Paul's laptop, which he had carelessly left open on the coffee table, a testament to his supreme arrogance. She pointed at it with a trembling, insistent finger, her eyes wide. Understanding dawned on Lauren's face. She moved to the laptop. The screen showed their local bank's website. The main checking account balance was shockingly, impossibly high. Clicking on the Transfers tab, she saw it. A recent wire transfer of $50,000 to a holding account under the name S. Beck. A quick, frantic search of his email archives for the name Shane Beck brought up a chain of correspondence that made her feel physically ill. Flight confirmations to Santa Fe one way, links to glossy real estate listings for Adobe-style homes, and the final, damning email that sealed his fate. "The house is ours, Paul. Title is clear. Just have to get the final GoFundMe payout and move your problem to her new home. See you in the sun, partner." At that exact moment, Paul walked back into the room, a broad smile on his face. "Your uncle says hello." He stopped dead, his sentence fragmenting. He saw Lauren at his laptop, her face pale and streaked with tears of horror, and he saw Carol in her wheelchair, her expression no longer helpless but one of fierce, triumphant fury. The smile evaporated from his face. The color drained from his skin. "Lauren, what are you doing?" he stammered, his voice weak. "It's over, Dad," Lauren said, her voice shaking with a cold rage he had never heard from her before. "I read the emails. I saw the bank transfers. Shane Beck. The house in Santa Fe. The state facility." The accusation hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Paul's face, the noble, saintly face the world had come to admire, crumpled. The mask didn't just slip, it shattered, revealing the ugly, craven, greedy man beneath. There was no denial. Only the pathetic, cornered look of a liar, caught in an inescapable spotlight. The confrontation that followed was brutal and swift, the truth spilling out and washing away 40 years of history like a toxic flood. That afternoon, when Lauren wheeled her mother out of the house and into the clean, fresh autumn air, it was not an escape. It was a liberation. The road ahead would be long and difficult, fraught with lawyers and healing. But as they drove away, and Carol felt the cool wind on her face for the first time in months, she closed her eyes. It was the feeling of freedom. It was the feeling of a new beginning.